Hello, my name is V.U.C.A, and I'm a professor in practice in the MBA programs at the University of Louisville. And professor in practice just simply means that in addition to my role in academia, I also own and operate businesses myself. So I certainly understand the challenges that we're all experiencing. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about next chapter planning, which I hope you will find very helpful in terms of not only dealing with the issues, but also really starting to think about playing offense and not just thinking about playing defense. So for about the last 3 or 4 years, I've been talking about an era of unprecedented change that's upon us. And the winds of change have been blowing a little bit more softly until recently. Obviously, in varying industries have felt higher degrees of change than others. But I think it's important today that we start thinking about not only surviving, but now thriving coming out of this environment, and what are the things that we can do to really make a difference as leaders for our teams. So if we think about what's so unusual about what we're dealing with now, is that prior to this crisis, we really tended as businesses to operate in 3 different modes. We were either in the survival mode, which many businesses unfortunately get stuck in. They struggle on an ongoing basis. Other businesses that are a bit more successful move to the tactical and then on to the strategic. And obviously, occasionally you'll go from strategic back into tactics, but effective businesses really have not had to think about survival for a long time. Well, what's happened in the current crisis is that all of these worlds have converged. These 3 modes of operation in many respects are affecting all businesses. Some businesses have literally had to go back to survival mode, literally had to go back to starting to think about, are we really going to make it? Obviously with the CARES Act, and we've all become familiar with the PPP and what that means. But it's really interesting to think about now, how are the ways that we can then, once we've stabilized the business, how can we start to think about being both tactical and strategic now? What we should know, or should have known before this, if we didn't, is that we have been living in a VUCA world for a long time. Many of you have heard this acronym. It was actually first used publicly back in the mid-90s or early 90s, during the first Persian Gulf War, but it actually had been talked about in the Army War College previously. We use it a lot in business today. But when we think about the fact that the world is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, especially when we look at technology, that's a really good example of that, because technology has disrupted many businesses. It's really changed the way a lot of industries have worked. But we saw that prior to that. Main Street was really impacted. By the way, larger big box retailers had come into region. So there have always been competitive forces at work. They're different today. And obviously today what's very unique is that literally, seemingly, that while the economy has hit the pause button and we're all sheltering in place, it's created a very different environment. But I think we really need to accept the fact that the future is going to be very different, and it's going to create enormous opportunities and enormous challenges. But what's interesting is when we think about it, the words victor and victim both have the same root, the Latin root for conquer. And so how do we ensure that we can emerge victorious and our teams can emerge victorious rather than being victims of what's occurring? What's interesting is that the businesses that I've seen that are most adaptive to change and most able to adapt actually do something they didn't even know that they were doing, but it's called action learning. They're really good about constantly innovating, constantly looking at new opportunities and really adapting to new environments. This notion of action learning is actually a bit of a science. It dates back to the 1940s, where a gentleman named REVANS, who ironically, Reg's father was the lead investigator on the Titanic disaster. So that had to be an interesting household to grow up in. But Reg was also on the team with Ernest Rutherford. Rutherford is best known for winning the Nobel Prize in identifying the atomic structure. So REVANS and Rutherford and this team worked together to ultimately split the atom for the first time. And obviously, thankfully, that it helped us win the war, as opposed to how World War II could have ended. But out of that, REVANS brought something from that experience that really stuck with him. And that's how he really was foundational in him creating action learning. And REVANS came up with this formula that learning is a sum of a small p plus a large Q. The small p means the things that we know, the things that we learn from school, best practices in our industry. The large Q is having a questioning insight. And the reason that he discovered this is that he was so taken with when Rutherford would get the whole team together. I mean, imagine the most brilliant minds at the time trying to solve this huge problem. How do we win the war? Because they knew that, the Axis were also working on this problem. And what Rutherford challenged them with constantly was not what they knew. What he would ask them over and over again as it related to any problem is, what does your ignorance look like? What questions should you be asking that you're not asking? And so I think we can all agree that we need to really get in touch with what our ignorance looks like now. We need to think about the fact that things are very different. We need to ask better questions. So I'm going to help you today in doing that. Also, realistically, when we think about the way many businesses operate, businesses that can operate in the tactical and the strategic really are more like chess players on the, if you think about the business world as being a game board, businesses that operate at the tactical or strategic levels for the most part really are playing chess. Unfortunately, many businesses today still operate really more in a survival mode, and that's really almost like playing checkers. So in a normal environment, you've really got chess players against playing checkers, and obviously the chess players are always going to have the advantage because they have different ways that they can move, whereas the folks playing checkers, are really stuck. It's the same as true in business. So we have to look at different ways. How do we evolve? If we're playing checkers, A, we need to recognize that. But then B, we need to think about, how do we evolve to becoming chess players? And I'm gonna provide some tools that I think will help you and your team do that. Next chapter planning really has 8 essential elements. But in times like these, in times of distress, I really believe that focusing on the most tangible elements, there are 4 tangible elements as it relates to next chapter planning. And those are trust. And what I mean by that is who do you trust? Who trusts you? We need to understand that better than we ever do. We need to understand that within our team. We need to understand that as it relates to the folks that we work with externally. And we need to have honest conversations about that with our team. If people we trust inside our team maybe aren't feeling good about the fact that we can trust a vendor or a supplier, or maybe they haven't told us the truth, we need to have those discussions, and the team needs to know it. Relationships, obviously, anybody in business understands the value of relationships. This is not new. What is new is that we have the opportunity now, while everybody is sheltering in place, we can reach people and establish new relationships in ways that we never could before. I've got a team that I am confident over the next 30 to 60 days, we will actually reach more people in the next 30 to 60 days that we will not be able to talk to in the next 5 or 6 years, because right now they're available, but they're going to be really busy in the near future when things start to unlock. So there's a limited window of opportunity. But at the same time, we also need to honor the relationships that we have. There's not going to be a better time when we can show people that are our clients and customers, or people within our team, that we care deeply about them and we want what's best for them. Time, obviously, this is a really critical now, because our time is in some ways constrained, in other ways we have more of it. So we need to really be sure that we're working effectively as teams and making sure that we're taking time where we need to and not spending time on activities that we don't need to take time on. Responsibility is green, and it actually is green in 2 ways. One, it's about earning green and retaining green. It really is about being financially responsible, but it's also about being green, being socially responsible. And I recognize that that's maybe things that we wanted to spend money as it relates to being socially responsible is not as easy today. But critically, we need to also keep those things in balance, because there's still things that we can do. So if you say, well, I'm not sure I buy this about trust and relationships, that's all, kind of fuzziness to me. I would submit to you, think about the items that we have on our shelves, the brands that we chose before as it relates to some of these products, and the brands that reside in our homes today or in our offices today. We're more open and willing to consider other options than ever before. And the same is true in business. If we've got suppliers who can't supply us, we're looking for other suppliers who can. So, and suppliers are finding interesting ways to reach new people. And again, it's just this notice that, yes, there are challenges, but there are also enormous opportunities. As many of you probably participate in, I have a Vistage group that I'm a part of. And I know YPO has great CEO roundtables as well. As does the many family business centers. We have the Family Business Center at the University of Louisville. And it was interesting, we had our meeting today, and this is literally the difference that people saw. One of our participants took 4 years to build a customer base, and in the last month, they have more than doubled that base. Another one, unfortunately, they were down 70% in their revenue, which means they're going to be losing money for the foreseeable future. One business was basically shut down entirely, but they were actually training people, getting them ready for what was going to come when things did get better. We also saw a situation where we had a couple people who said they'd had the best month ever. One person said they had the best 2 months ever. So again, in spite of these challenges, there are people finding ways to overcome these challenges. And again, it's important as we think about this to really focus on these 4 areas and really think thematically. We tend to want to, okay, here's the problem, let's come up with a solution. That's linear thinking. We need to begin to start to solve problems thematically. And that's what next chapter planning is intended to do. If we have to accept the fact, and we do, that we are going to see more changes over the next decade than we've seen probably in the last 100 years in a lot of different ways. We can be the beneficiaries of that, but we have to also make sure that we have a really solid foundation and a really solid center. And I would challenge you, and you'll get my email at the end of this. Tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me that there are 4 things that are more important than these 4 things. If you're not going to focus on anything else, I really believe these are crucial. So how do we do that? Well, let me start to share with you. Effectively, what you need to do, in my opinion, and I've done this with a number of teams for a number of years, is to sit down and develop a list of questions around each of these themes. So these questions, like the ones that I've put on the screen, are just starter questions. I don't care if you scratch these out, mark them up, change them, amend them. What matters is that you actually work with your team to develop that you agree that these questions need to be answered, and you come up with new questions that you feel need to be answered as it relates to this particular theme. And it needs to be thought about in terms of among our team, externally for partners, for any stakeholders, any collaborators that we may be involved with. We literally need to come up with these questions. So the first part of the exercise is coming up with the questions as a group. The second part of the exercise is then having the group independently come up with their own answers. Take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever the team needs. Some can get it done in 10 or 15, and let them come up with their own answers, and then bring all those answers together and listen to everybody. Have everybody around the room talk about how they interpreted the questions, how they answered the questions. I promise you there is enormous value that can be gained from this exercise. Same thing, same exercise for relationships. These are some starter questions. And I should say, there's going to be a PDF available, should be available on YouTube via the link. If you can't access them in some way, just email me and I'll be glad to send you the documents. But you'll also get a PDF that's available of this entire presentation. Obviously, please remember that all the content is copywritten, but you're welcome to use the materials, and I hope it's very helpful. Around time, obviously, are we making good use of our time, and are we still being considerate of others' times? Yes, we can assume people are not as busy, but we should always make sure that we're talking to people, especially external partners and internal team members who are very busy. Is this a good time, to have these discussions? What's really important is starting to really divide and conquer. Once we've established that we know that we're going to survive, how do we divide and conquer? And the reality is, for a lot of businesses, we're starting to see that whereas maybe the majority of the time had been spent in survival mode, those days are sort of behind us, in some regards thanks to PPP, getting funded for some, for others just recognizing, hey, we're actually having some of the best of times. But they're also thinking about, now, wait a minute, is there going to be slack in the system? Is there going to be disruptions in the supply chain? Is there going to be a place in the future where maybe I'm lucky now, but in a month or two, there's going to be a gap and I need to be thinking about it? These are the kinds of things that we need to start to think about, is how do we divide our time so we as teams can analyze these different situations. In terms of, again, responsibility, it's both financial and social. Again, the whole point is coming up with other questions. The good news is even if we don't have a lot of economic resources to dedicate to social causes as we usually do, there are still things that we can do, volunteering, helping, members of our team get food together or get canned goods to people. There are a number of folks that need our help in our communities, and there are a lot of different ways that we can serve that either don't cost a lot of money or can really create enormous value to our communities. So one of the things I will leave you with is Thomas Fuller, an author and historian, and one of the things that he said that I really appreciate is the darkest hour is just before the dawn. I think it's really important that we really start to focus on how do we stop playing not to lose, which is what most of us are doing. We were playing not to lose, and how do we start playing to win? Those are the things that we really need to consider. And again, think about it. We're going to teeter before we run, but I promise you, if you and your team spend the time to really have thoughtful conversations, it might take you 2 hours, it might take you 3. It will probably not take you more than that to have these discussions. there will be enormous value for your teams that will endure for a long, long time. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is maybe you do this first. If you have a large organization, do this first with your leadership team. Make sure your leadership team's comfortable with the process, and then have your leadership team take and do the same exercise with each of their divisions or each of their teams or departments, and then bring that information back. Again, there will be enormous value for you and for your team in doing this. I need to give special thanks to a couple of people who this content's been created over the last 5 years or so. James E. Hughes is a friend, mentor, and colleague, and Angelica Mazzaro is an unbelievable artist and truly has been an inspiration in helping me develop this, so special thanks to them. Most importantly, I would be remiss if I didn't say, in light of this being about next chapter planning, let's all do what we can to ensure that our next chapter is our best chapter. And I promise you, if you focus in these areas, you will make incredible strides toward being able to do that. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Please don't hesitate to email me if you have further questions.